Hello. Hi everyone. Thanks a lot for joining. First of all, a very happy new year to all of you. Or This is our first webinar in this new year. Of course, there are the timing of this webinar is very important contextually. I think very I would say different times, unusual times, important to talk about and discuss about these times that we are in right now. So, thanks a lot for joining on Saturday, and let's get started. So quickly, like we do every time, just discussing our performance. This performance is as of today, which is 17th January 2026. हमारे जो दोनों portfolios है टेक्नो फंडा एंड वेंचर कैपिटल इन्वेस्टर्स we've done uh, close to about 40% plus, right? So you can check our small case if that is of interest to you. But आज क्या डिस्कस करने वाले हैं हम लोग? So basically, there are 4 5 important things that are happening, and I have sort of put it in a haphazard manner. We'll try and make sense of it towards the end. We'll put all of these things together and try to make a sense कि what's happening चल क्या रहा है इंडिया में, चाइना में, यूएस में, globally. You know, the interlinkages are very strong, as you know, right? Anything happens in one part of the world affects the other part of the world. So the idea is to discuss all of these pieces because I keep getting questions ki, what about the metal rally? What about the rupee? What about China, India, US, all of that? So I have devoted one or two slides to each of these topics, and then towards the end of it, we'll try and put it all together to see how these things make sense. So, so as you know, the only thing, uh, the only currency sort of the Indian rupee has been like the worst performing currency across Asia. And in fact, if you look at this list here on the left side of the screen, you will see कि सबसे खराब performance Indian rupee का ही है, right? So we've depreciated. Indian rupee has depreciated against the dollar significantly. Over the last whatever over 2025, very poor performance. And we were doing quite well, right? Post COVID. I mean, COVID was a scenario where we were one of the countries which handled, financially, economically, we handled COVID really well. Uh, and then coming out of COVID, uh, we are in a situation where our currency has depreciated so much against the dollar. तो चल क्या रहा है basically? The thing is, a lot of negative factors are contributing to this, right? I think one of the most important factors ये कि पिछले एक साल से इंडियन मार्केट्स में लगातार एफआईआई सेलिंग हुई है, which means foreign institutional investors and FPIs have consistently sold. I think starting August September 2024, which is when we started moving to gold silver. Our a lot of our clients will know. एंड तब से एफआईआई सेलिंग जो है वो चल ही रहा है ऑलमोस्ट द टून ऑफ 20-22 billion dollars. I think FI selling has already happened, which is capital moving out of India. Uh, and of course, after the Trump announcement, after the Trump war, trade war, and basically the 25% tariffs that were put on us, उसके बाद तो सिचुएशन और भी खराब हो गया, right? So rupee started depreciating even more aggressively after a 50% tariff was placed on us, right? So um, institutional money started moving out from equities, from markets. People started preferring dollar over the rupee, and it was the RBI landed trying to support the market and all of that, but I think now अब ऐसा सिचुएशन हो गया है कि they've let the rupee fall, free fall, to be honest. and their intervention is now very limited, right? So they're only trying to support, they're not trying to protect the direction. So basically, they've let it free fall, right? And because of those reasons, and of course, we are a fairly high importing nation in terms of oil, and gold, silver purchases have also increased significantly in 2025. And because of that, huge amount of imports happening in terms of oil, gold, silver, because the gold, silver also we don't manufacture at all, but the demand remains very, very high, especially during the festive season that we saw. So because of that, our current account deficit, which used to be in surplus, is now negative almost 1.3% of the GDP, and there are sources that indicate that this can go to almost negative 2.5% of the GDP, which is a fairly high number, right? So all of these reasons uh, basically leading to the Indian rupee depreciating. In some people are suggesting, some analysts are saying that the कुछ ज़्यादा selling हो गई है. The rupee now can recover quickly by 5 to 10%. It is undervalued right now, is what a lot of these analysts are saying. And hence, there is a case being built कि if foreign money starts to come back in India now, so there is a possibility that that capital can make double-digit returns in India, right? This is one sort of logic that is being presented to FIIs, saying that ki abhi rupee has depreciated a lot. There is some scope of recovery here to the extent of 5 to 7%, and hence if you invest in India, you might get a what 7-8% rupee return plus another 4 to 5% rupee dollar conversion की वजह से जो return आता है, and hence you will still be able to make double digit returns in India, and that's the logic sort of being uh, told to foreign investors and FPIs, right? But mota mota, this is what has led to aggressive sort of depreciation of the Indian rupee. Also, in a way, I think net net from capital markets point of view, we've only seen selling, and I think one of the reasons that we've seen a lot of selling is because we don't have an AI trade in India. Matlab, if you look at all the major economies, of course, US remains the center of all the AI activity, and China also is a close second, at least with DeepSeek and their electric vehicles and solar innovations. तो वहाँ पे कुछ activity चल रहा है because of which capital keeps to flow. But from an innovation point of view, from new technologies point of view, I think Indian markets overall have lagged because we honestly don't have enough companies that do business in AI. A lot of innovation, even from a uh, even from a solar or electric vehicles point of view, it's not that we've been exporting to the outside world, right? It's mostly for our domestic consumption is what we are catering to, even from a solar and electric vehicles point of view. So honestly, none of the new technologies, so to say, are present in the Indian market, and hence, but 2025 was all about AI, right? If you think about huge capitals being deployed in AI, both in US, in China. In fact, a lot of capital moving from India to China was because that China was building these technologies, but they were fairly undervalued, and hence it made a lot of sense to move capital there, right? तो उस वजह से बहुत सारा कैपिटल जो है वो इंडिया से चाइना शिफ्ट हुआ, यूएस शिफ्ट हुआ, बट हमारे पास वैसे ट्रेड्स ही नहीं है, द सो कॉल्ड एआई ट्रेड्स which can pull capital into India. So it's all about domestic consumption, which, as you know, थोड़ा स्लो डाउन हो गया था, तो उस वजह से वैल्यूएशंस वेर हाई, डोमेस्टिक कंजम्पशन स्लो था, तो कैपिटल जस्ट वेंट गोइंग आउट, जस्ट केप्ट गोइंग आउट, एंड दैट रिमेन्स द केस इन November, December also of 2025, right? So that was one sort of big feature of the market कि भाई रुपी गिर रहा है. दूसरा क्या हो रहा है कि गोल्ड, सिल्वर और कॉपर जो है वो रैली में है, राइट? तो आई मीन we've been investing in gold, silver since 2024, March, April 2024. And in November, we did something very bold. We moved a significant part of the capital to gold, silver, and debt. and that continues to be our portfolio. And November May silver was $50 today as we speak right now. I think yesterday it touched, or 2 days before it touched 92.93 and has corrected slightly. But that is the kind of rally that we've seen in the last 3 months, right? So it's been phenomenal, and we've been talking about it. People who attend our webinar know that we've been talking about it and why and what sort of got us into taking those trades. But essentially, uh, this is the time to be bullish on metals, right? What are the factors? A lot of geopolitical, of course, issues. Har jagah, a lot of wars being fought. On one side, you have now it's a bipolar world, as you know, right? So China is equally sort of as strong a nation as US now. So the world is now basically split into two polars. One, and you will have basically China and Russia, right? And on the other hand, you will have the US. So because of that, a lot of sort of proxy wars being fought across the world, and I think this will keep continuing for the next 2-3 decades. अगले 15-20 साल का ये फ्लेवर रहने वाला है कि भाई मार्केट में दुनिया में कहीं ना कुछ चलता रहेगा, बिकॉज द वर्ल्ड हैज मूव फ्रॉम यूनिपोलर टू बाइपोलर, एंड हेंस some or the other activity or war or some sort of uh, you know some sort of sort of cold war, physical war, whatever you want to say, between US on one side and China, Russia on the other side. And because of these geopolitical issues, I think gold, if not silver, at least gold will continue to be in favor for the next 2 decades. I mean, think of it as a long term. Kyuki, uh, whenever these geopolitical issues, they sort of, whenever these wars sort of become more prominent, and then you typically see that gold starts to become the flavor of the uh, sort of, for investors, it becomes like a go-to asset. दूसरी जो बात है which a lot of people have talked about कि भाई AI में बहुत ज़्यादा सिल्वर कॉपर का यूजेज है, because of which the demand has shot up significantly. And in terms of supply, which is the fourth point here, कि structurally जो है, there has not been a lot of investment in developing mines across the world, and hence we are in a situation where demand is quite high and supply is sort of uh, continues to reduce, and hence the demand supply gap. And जो पिछले whatever physical silver and gold reserves that we have actually are depleting, right? So slowly, physical silver and copper are reducing, and there's not enough supply. And there's a lot of, as you now see, there's a lot of in my sense, in my view, the demand is also because a lot of people have started hoarding these metals now, because obviously they are seeing ki bhai future is looking bright, so why not just hoard these metals, and that also is adding to the demand supply mismatch, right? So and the one of the drivers of all of this is basically the weakening dollar, राइट? सो अभी पिछले साइड में ही बोला कि रुपी जो है वो डॉलर वर्सेस रिड्यूस हो रहा है, राइट? सो रुपी इज depreciating वर्सेस द डॉलर, but the dollar itself also is a depreciating currency. It's not like the dollar is becoming more and more strong. ऐसा कुछ भी नहीं है. Dollar itself is weakening because inflation continues to be high and Fed is on a rate cutting cycle, right? So because of that, people are preferring to move to metals and gold, silver, and this is always the case whenever you have, historically also, we saw this happening during the 2008 financial crisis, we saw this during the dot-com bubble, as well as we saw this during the 1917-80s में जो crash हुआ था US market में. So typical, phenomena keeps repeating every time, whether it is the dot-com bubble or the housing crash or whatever. Like they say, the the patterns are same, but not exactly same, right? So things will keep replicating themselves, and the economic situations will look almost very similar. And we are in one such similar situation where, we could compare ourselves to what happened in, let's say, 2000 dot-com bubble or 2008 financial crisis. And and that is the reason why gold, silver continue to go up. Abhi, a lot of questioning is also around China because we have been invested in Hang Seng Bees. So obviously the question is, what are we thinking about China and why are we holding that instrument? Again, not a buy sell recommendation, but from our view, I mean, when we took that call in 2024, uh, one reason for taking that call was China, of course, was very undervalued, right? So in September 2024, the overall market, the price to earnings ratios for Chinese equities was about 12 and a half, 13 times, uh, right? And since let's say in December 2025, that valuation has moved to 18, 19 times price to earnings ratio. And all of this is because of P re-rating, right? So suddenly people started finding Indian markets expensive, and उनको दिख रहा था कि चाइना एक्सपेंसिव नहीं है, चाइना में डीप सीक हो रहा है, चाइना में इलेक्ट्रिक व्हीकल्स बन रहे हैं विच आर बीइंग sold globally, and Chinese companies are taking up market share from, let's say, German manufacturers or European manufacturers, right? And that was something that people started noticing. Of course, solar and electronics, all of that has been the core of China for a very long period of time. So people suddenly started noticing ki, here is a country which is doing so well, exporting globally, taking away market share, and even and still trading at 12, 13 times price to earnings, which is very, very cheap for a country like China. So since then, we've seen the Hang Seng Bees go up to 40%. Price to earnings ratios have gone from 12, 13 to 18, 19. And but most of it is about PE rating. I mean, on the ground, if you look at on the ground, China was just coming out of a real estate crisis. In fact, they are still dealing with, property market are yet to be stabilized. I mean, it is happening as we speak right now, but it's a slow process, right? The stabilization of the property market. But what can drive markets going forward in China is basically broader earnings growth. That is yet to be seen, and we are also sort of monitoring that situation right now. And but generally, the thought process is key. Today, US, for example, if you combine the market capitalization of all the countries put together, US alone accounts for 70% of the 60-70% of the market capitalization of the entire world. India is only 4%. And China China, in a way, we feel ki for the next 20 years, a lot of this capital will move to China because you will see a lot of AI companies, electric vehicle companies, solar companies, renewable companies. So that sort of innovation happening there in China, which will drive revenue and profit growth and hence valuation and market capitalization for China as a country, right? And I think somewhere the value migration will happen from a capital point of view, where capital will move from US to China. That is a phenomena which will be a long-term phenomena. It will happen over the next 2-3 decades. But मुझे लगता है ऐसा कि धीरे-धीरे वो होने वाला है, and hence as investors, I think it is very important to study China to see what is happening there from a uh, from innovation point of view, from new technologies point of view, from how these companies, how these Chinese companies are shaping the world, uh, right? And basically, their dominance is increasing across the world. And if you know what is happening between India China right now, Indian economy is now starting to open for Chinese companies. I mean, I think this news came 2 weeks back, where finance ministry is now evaluating allowing Chinese companies to bid for projects in India, right? So that is something which India is also opening up in terms of Chinese companies participating in Indian growth opportunities, right? So in that sense, I think one should definitely look at it. Whether you invest or you don't invest is a different matter. But over a period of time, ऐसा होगा कि China will become more and more dominant, right? But it needs to be seen how their government also looks at capital markets. They've not been very free and fair in the past, so that's again a problem. But it needs to be seen. I mean, China has to become bigger than what it is today, and US at 70% is definitely very overvalued. And I think there is a balance of some capital flow that will definitely happen, mostly in favor of China, in our opinion. Now let's look at what India is doing right now. And if you follow what we've been discussing, so India may slow down Aya, and then we had rate cuts, we had GST concessions, we had tax concessions given to consumers. Ki bhai, you go out and spend more money. And so as we stand right now, Indian markets since September 2024 have been relatively flat. September 2024 market was at 26,000 Nifty 50. We are back in December. We touched 26,200, 300 again, and now I think we've corrected over the last 2 weeks. We've corrected slightly, बट सो मोटा मोटी कुछ नहीं हुआ है मार्केट में, इंडियन मार्केट्स में कुछ नहीं हुआ है फ्रॉम अ वैल्यूएशन पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू ऑल्सो. वी आर स्टिल ट्रेडिंग अराउंड 22 times price to earnings, which is not cheap by the way, but relatively what has happened in comparison to China is that China was at 12, 13 and now it's become 18. So relative to China, you know uh, absolute wise we are still expensive, but relative to China, China has gotten slightly more expensive than India. And the problem is कि चाइना में अभी भी अर्निंग्स ग्रोथ आया नहीं है. हमारे यहाँ क्या हो रहा है कि in December the news flow has become slightly positive. So if you look at, I've put in three pieces of news. First talks about consumer companies where which are seeing some sort of demand recovery in Q3 led by GST cuts. The second screenshot talks about car and two-wheeler demands have gone up significantly after the GST cuts. Obviously, those concessions have helped. And the third important thing, which is relating to the banking sector, and one of the, I think, consensus-wise, everybody now knows that banking is doing well. So one thing that is definitely driving banking sector is कि retail and MSME में जो credit growth था, जो 5-6% तक चला गया था credit growth, now that is upwards of 10%. So it's 11%, 11.4% in November 2025 it was, and so that number has started to improve. So in India, if you look at standalone basis, we are not very cheap, but we are seeing some sort of recovery after the cyclical downturn that we went through in 2025, right? So, so that's mota moti. This has not been. People are saying कि now is the time to enter into Indian markets and maybe build some positions. But FII still don't buy the story. They are still continuing to sell even as we speak in November, December, maybe they continue to sell. In January also, we are seeing the same trend continue. Basically, capital continues to move back to either China or US. अब चलते हैं यूएस पे. Now that we've discussed China, we've discussed India. Now let's look at the bigger piece of this whole puzzle, which is the US markets. And we've been talking about it for some time now. We are bearish on US. We believe that AI bubble is real at some point of time. If not a crash, at least a correction is definitely warranted. Uh, and we expect S&P to correct significantly over the next 1 year by at least 25-30%. Again, this is not a buy sell recommendation. This is our opinion on how we see the markets. Right. So I read it somewhere and I really liked it. So honestly, this is not my original idea, but the framework goes like this: that there are four ways you can, four sort of benchmarks to check if you want to basically decide on whether a market situation looks like a bubble or not, right? So the first thing is over ownership, second thing is overvaluation, third is over investment, and the fourth is over leverage, right? So over ownership, uh, you can see on the right side there is a chart which talks about investment in property versus investment in stocks. So US is in a very unique position where the investment in overall investment in stocks is now more than overall investment in property, right? So people there have really taken it to heart that property is not the place to invest, but stock market is the only place to invest. And so a lot of people in and a lot of retail investors particularly have taken interest in stock markets, especially because of the rally they've seen in the last 2 years. And they have a lot of exposure in AI companies. ठीक है, तो AI stocks have done well. In fact, the only sector which has done well for the US economy is those top 7, 8 AI stocks where they have they are the reason uh, why Nasdaq and S&P have contributed to what almost to the tune of 20-25% returns over the last 2 years, right? Or maybe more. तो they have huge exposure. अगर यहाँ पे कुछ क्रैश आता है तो this is going to directly hit consumer बिकॉज रिटेल पार्टिसिपेशन मार्केट में आज के दिन पे बहुत ज़्यादा है यूएस में, राइट? इनफैक्ट पीपल हैव टेकन लेवरेज टू बाय स्टॉक्स. ऑफ कोर्स लार्ज कंपनीज आर टेकिंग लेवरेज. आई मीन यूएस में even AI investments, for example, are happening by taking leverage. So a lot of debt being taken by, for example, companies like Meta, and OpenAI, all of these companies to basically invest in data centers and NVIDIA chips and whatnot, right? So there is obviously over ownership with a lot of retail participation. This is one benchmark, property versus stocks. Over leverage, a lot of these people, retail investors for sure, but a lot large corporations also have taken huge debt to basically finance their AI investments. And overvaluation we've discussed a lot. I mean, Nasdaq today trades at 30 times price to earnings, very, very high. The market itself has gone 10x in 10 years. So again, one of the criteria where which basically points to a situation of overvaluation in US markets. Overinvestment, of course, because today these tech investments are close to about 6% of the overall GDP of US. So that's again something which is very, very high compared to previous years. So, in a way, if you put it together, this 4O framework sort of is fitting, and we can, in some sense, say that कि भाई US में bubble है, AI bubble है, all of that is for real. It's not कि it's not something which is a farce. Now, we've been talking about a market crash, as you know, which is why we moved everything to gold, silver, and debt. So we have very little क्या zero equity exposure है आज के दिन पे. Uh, but so what are we basically waiting for, right? I mean, just to sort of end this presentation, uh, what will be the catalyst for a crash, right? Because we've seen in 2000 dot-com bubble as well as the 2008 financial crisis, you need a trigger for a crash. I mean, overvaluation can remain for a very long period of time. S&P or Nasdaq can sustain the current levels for, let's say, another 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. We don't know. We can't time the market anyway. Overvalued है इतना पता है, but कितने दिन तक overvalued रह सकता है ये नहीं पता, right? And so what will be the trigger, right? What basically can cause the markets to crash? So I and our team, we started to study कि भाई what happened in dot-com bubble 2008 financial में crisis में क्या हुआ, what actually led to the markets finally starting to go down. So if you look at the slide here, uh, and the red dotted line is how the interest rates have moved. So the key takeaway from both of these charts from the dot-com bubble as well as the 2008 financial crisis is that the market peaks have occurred, right? Af Towards the near end of the hiking cycle. मतलब interest rate बढ़ता रहता है and markets also keep going up, right? So the Fed will, because of inflation or whatever, Fed will keep increasing the rates. But as these rates increase, market will also keep going up. That is what happened in both of these times. And the fall actually happens when the rate cut starts to happen, when the rate cuts begin, right? So both the times you will see the red dotted line when it starts to go down, that is when the crash also begins. And market को लगने लगता है कि अब ये फेड के बस की बात नहीं है, फेड कितना भी रेट कट कर ले, दिस इज completely out of their hand, and that is when the collapse starts to happen, right? Basically when market believes that the Fed can do nothing to stop this, to stop the economy from going into a recession, or the growth rates to go down, or whichever you want to look at it. But basically अब Fed के बस की बात नहीं है, ये अब गिरना ही गिरना है, चाहे रेट्स को 0% भी लेके चले जाए, अब इसका कोई सोल्यूशन नहीं है. एंड हेंस एट दैट पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम देयर इज complete loss, matlab trust goes down, people start selling, and that's when you see a crash like situation, right? This is from the past two experiences that we've seen. Now let's compare it with what is happening right now. So we've put it in phases, right? So you can see the red dotted line going up. So the Fed was increasing the rates, and like last times, the market kept going up. The green line is the S&P 500, which is going up as the Fed has kept raising the rates, right? So the 23-24 AI rally is, despite the rates plateauing at 5.5%, the market kept going up. Now in somewhere mid 2025 से लेकर अभी तक, we've seen the rates stay at 5.5%, but the market has kept going up, right? So touching almost 7,000 levels by December 2025. As we speak in Jan, I think it's very close to 6,800, 900 levels. So we are about 7,000 levels for S&P 500, and the rates have started going down, right? So ideally, if you look at it from a 2008 point of view, this is exactly the most dangerous period where the Fed starts to cut rates, and the market will hold up to a point where people will believe that things are okay. The Fed is able to do a soft landing. But whenever the market gets this perception that the Fed won't be able to do a soft landing, there are high chances that investors will lose trust and there will be a sudden selling. So, this is exactly the dangerous phase that we are talking about, where things can go wrong very quickly and in a very short period of time, uh, right? But let's see. I mean, if the Fed is able to manage this soft landing, which a lot of people believe that the Fed will do a soft landing, so then I think there's no real issue. Then we might not see a crash, but we might see a correction. But if the Fed is not able to manage this entire thing, and suddenly if things look like it's out of the control of the Fed, then we might see a crash also, right? So the last phase wherein, late 2025 to now, the Fed has already lowered the rates till 3.5%. There is pressure on Fed to keep reducing the rates further. But as we speak right now, inflation remains very sticky, close to 2.7, 2.8%. अगर यहाँ से रेट कट किया and inflation goes up, then Fed will have no option but to again start raising the rates. So there's a lot of, to be honest, this is a very tricky phase. I think the Fed also is quite confused what to do, what not to do. On one way, there's a political pressure. On the other side, economics tells them that, don't do so many rate cuts, right? But again, you have Trump sitting on your head, pushing you to do rate cuts. So they are also honestly very confused. These are S&Ps are all-time high. The Fed doesn't know what to do. Investors are wait and watch. The only thing that is doing well for their economy is AI. So the money keeps pouring in. But as we have seen stock-wise, and I have not discussed stock-wise here, but Nvidia, Microsoft, all of these companies have actually, if you look at the last 2, 3 months, the price has actually has stabilized around the 180, $190. So that is also not going up. So it's not like these stocks are, I think November, December, they've mostly stayed around that level, which to me, in some sense, indicating that वो हो गया उसका peak मतलब there is no scope for further upside from at least 180 $190 levels. Again, no buy sell recommendation, just trying to understand how these stocks are behaving right now. A lot of these stocks have are might just be at their all-time high right now. It may fall next week, next month, maybe 6 months, I don't know. But at least the upside seems to be very, very limited right now, whereas the downside is quite high. The fall can, bring down these stocks specifically, and of course the broader market significantly. Right. So that's motamoti broadly what I wanted to cover. If you have any questions, we can move to Q&A now. I mean, and you can post your questions in the chat box. I'll be happy to, take whatever questions you have to the best of my abilities and knowledge. Um, so we'll wait for some time before the question starts coming in. Uh, but yeah, Kshitij, इसमें 1 minute. No, no comment. Okay. What are the best ways we can play metal rally? No direct metal ETFs in India. There are actually, there is, if I remember correctly, there is ICICI commodity ETF. Uh, but yeah, essentially these ETFs invest in companies like Hindustan Zinc and National Aluminium and Vedanta. They wouldn't have the direct metal exposure, right? So if you want to play it through ETFs, you'll have to play it. Basically, these ETFs will essentially take exposure in the companies and not really direct in the metal. If you want to do metals, then you have to get into MCX futures, which is very risky. So take your call. But I think gold and silver are available to be invested directly through these and ETFs, right? So those are the instruments available. Any target for gold and silver for this calendar? So look, I mean, Um, we were initially saying $90. We've already reached $90. And we started buying silver when it was at what, 30 $35. So quite a significant upside already. But uh, we think, and I think the markets will surprise us, just like it did a lot of people, because even while we were saying people to buy silver, a lot of people felt कि नहीं ये तो हो गया अभी बहुत expensive हो गया इससे ज़्यादा सिल्वर थोड़ी जाता है बट वो सिल्वर जाता रहा and it reached 80 $90. Now I personally think that ये तो अभी Jan 2026 स्टार्ट हुआ है इस साल इन्वेस्ट करने को और कुछ है ही नहीं इक्विटीज में तो now you can think of gold silver as places to protect capital and make some returns. How much returns? Difficult to say, but there are estimates saying silver can reach 3.5 lakhs as well. Uh, Gold can touch $6,000. Currently, we are about $4,600. Silver is at 90. There are targets that silver can touch $150. And the technical chart also, I mean, in terms of levels, we can certainly see those levels. So if gold breaks 4,500, 4,600, then of course it will get to 6,000. And silver also, there's huge upside, almost to the extent of 40-50%. So, and equities have still not started correcting yet, right? A huge chunk of capital will move to gold and silver after the crash or during the correction. Crash, correction, whichever way you look at it, a significant capital has to move into gold, silver, uh, supported by whatever is happening geopolitically, whatever is happening in terms of inflation in US, in terms of the dollar weakening, in terms of other currencies trying to shift dollar as a reserve currency. All of that activity basically says कि भाई आपके पोर्टफोलियो में गोल्ड सिल्वर तो रहना ही चाहिए. If you are a long-term investor and not trying to time the market, gold and silver should be in your portfolio. There will be small short-term corrections on the way, right? So the uptrend continues. However, I think over the weekend also we have seen some $5, $10, $5 to $7 correction in silver. So small corrections on the way will keep happening, but I think one should stay invested. In terms of targets, I think we can see another 40-50% upside for sure, both in gold and silver. Best ways to invest in copper. So sadly, I mean, you will have to take exposure into Hindustan Copper. Again, not a buy sell recommendation, but copper में directly invest करने का कोई option ही नहीं, because copper bees available नहीं है. कोई भी I think AMC वो option नहीं provide करता है. And if you don't want to do MCX, then the only option that is basically Hindustan Copper. Not a buy sell recommendation, but just explaining the options out. Copper में again, I think the story is very good because copper is also going through uh, a demand supply mismatch, just like the silver story. Copper is also, in a situation where there is huge demand, scarce supply. Things will become the demand supply mismatch will keep increasing over a period of time. So that again remains a very strong story. Um, but I would not stretch beyond that. Like I would not go into zinc and aluminum and steel and all that because वहाँ पे उतना demand supply का issue नहीं है. Uh, I think if you want to play the metal story, just try and restrict yourself to these three metals. Don't go beyond that. It might just backfire and the risk might just be too high. Trump is pro markets and midterm elections and yeah, his market correction before US. So again, everything is possible. We can't say anything in terms of timing. Like, मैं, we've sold in November and we are waiting, right? Uh, so we continue to wait as we make money on the current investments that we have. So, but very difficult to say. What will be the trigger? Will Japan be the big trigger? We don't know. Japan could also be a trigger, right? Will the housing market be a trigger? That's also possible. Some people are talking about housing market being a trigger for the collapse again. Some people are talking Japan, some people are talking interest rates, inflation, all of that, anything, trust in the debt market, all of that are possible potential reasons for the market to go down. What will eventually happen is very difficult to say, especially difficult to say कि क्या टाइमिंग रहेगा कभी भी हो सकता है but yeah, so uh, I don't know. I mean, elections typically don't matter a lot. I mean, with experience, I can tell you, elections just bring in volatility. Elections don't really determine whether the market will. Elections can never be a trigger for the market to go up or down, right? So, of course, post-elections, what happens can be if the government decides to do one way or the other, but just elections happening can't be a trigger for the market to go down. Yeah, any level where we can expect. So, I mean, all sorts of levels, but I think a 20-25% correction is definitely possible. क्योंकि Indian markets anyway, especially एक साल से कुछ हो नहीं रहा है. A lot of FII capital is already moved out. So, if let's say a crash happens and more selling happens, then of course a lot of FI has already sold, right? So they'll sell more. If the US market crashes by 30-35%, अपना थोड़ा 5-10% कम होगा, we will crash by 25-30% maybe. So I expect actually Nifty 50 to go below 20K, but it will go to 15, 16, 17, 18. Difficult to say, but I think it will get below 20K is definitely possible. The US proclamation. So, So, so we are definitely bullish on metals, right? Uh, and I think you know we in Indian markets at least, if you're not into M6 futures and all, the only options remain is that you invest in the stocks themselves, which is these companies that manufacture these metals, refine these metals, or the metals themselves through the silver and gold we exactly. Mutual fund investments. What is recommended for mutual fund investments? See, mutual funds. Uh, again, uh, I think if you've been invested in mutual funds for long, depends how long have you been invested in mutual funds. If the market corrects, of course, mutual funds will also correct, no doubt about it. You can use this as opportunity. Our philosophy is that we try and be at the right time, right place. So for us, timing the market is important. But people who are passive investors can just ignore this advice because you can just keep doing your SIPs through the ups and downs of the market and you will still make good returns, right? So it's important to say this before what I'm going to say next is that if you are looking to time the markets, if you are really looking to, let's say, sell the peak, buy the bottom, at that, and if that's the philosophy, then you can, depending upon how aggressive you are, look at rationalizing some of your mutual fund investments, which is to say that, if you have huge exposure in small and mid caps, and small and mid caps have done really well for the last 4 or 5 years, then this might just be a very good opportunity to take some money out from your mutual fund investments and park it in debt or hybrid funds, right? Because debt or hybrid funds, at their end, the portfolio manager is able to decide how much to invest in debt and how much to invest in equity. So they are able to do a good job of that. In which case, the mutual fund will do relatively well. Your capital will also stay protected during the correction phase. So I would recommend that you move some of your mutual fund investments to debt or hybrid funds. It is, in my view, it's definitely a good time to take some money out, especially given that Indian markets are back to 26,000. तो आप almost all time high peak पे बेच रहे हो. Uh, don't worry about the last 1 year. Last 1 year में कुछ नहीं हुआ रहेगा. But and my understanding is a lot of portfolios, individual stock wise, if people have built equity portfolios, then although the market is back to all time high, but a lot of stocks are in negative, right? So they might not be able to do it, but if you are able to do it, take some money off. This is a good time, not a bad idea. 4-5 साल के बुल रन के बाद थोड़ा एक 20-25% का करेक्शन आना पॉसिबल है, हेल्दी है, एंड ये इस पेस से नहीं चल सकता, राइट? सो कोविड में जो हुआ वो अब अगले 2-3 साल होना बहुत मुश्किल है. एंड इसलिए मैं कह रहा हूँ कि थोड़ा कैपिटल आप निकाल सकते हो ओनली इफ यू आर somebody who believes in timing the market. If you are a regular SIP guy, then just keep doing your SIPs. This advice is not for you, right? So I would sort of put a disclaimer saying that. Now, to what extent you sell your mutual fund is completely up to you. One option is, for example, you take out the profits. That is option number one. Option number two is you sell 30% of the portfolio. Option number three is you sell 50% of the portfolio. Option number four, of course, is you sell everything and put it in debt. Again, to what level of aggressiveness you are, you can take that call or talk to your investment advisor, right? I mean, depending upon uh, it might not be a bad idea to take some money out and put it in something which at least where your capital is protected, which is debt and metals, of course, are flavor of the market right now, along with banking stocks. But banking हम ले नहीं रहे, तो हम metals ही रहे. Any other questions? Cool. I mean, if not, then we'll end this session. Anyways, I'm reachable, so our numbers are listed on our website. You can always reach out to us, talk to us. If you are a new investor looking to invest, then call us and we'll see how we can help you, make this transition from your individual portfolios to, uh, to bringing you on the right path. And let's see. And Baki to, uh, my our investors are definitely in touch with us, so that's completely open. So I'll see you next month. Hopefully, around mid of next month, we'll do another webinar. At that point of time, we'll see what the situation is. But till then, if there's anything, just reach out. Thanks a lot. Thank you for your time and have a great weekend. Happy New Year. Again. Thank you.